I just can't understand how we who say that everyone is created in the image and in the likeness of God, and we pursue the imago Dei, the image of God in everyone, on account of that, everyone has to be treated well. Palestinians are the exception. It doesn't compute with our theology. And if there is a theological, or if there's a deity that demands that people are excluded because they are born in Palestine, because they are Palestinian, I do not think that deity is worth following.
In this episode, I have a conversation with Elom Tettey-Tamaklo. If you attended Church of the Crossroads last weekend, you might have heard him speak, and he gave a very impactful talk about his journey out of Christian Zionism in Ghana, and then all the way to getting arrested at the Harvard encampment last year. A very fascinating story about his background and his encounters with Palestinians and the role that played in shaping the way that he thinks now and really challenging Christian Zionism. Uh, Elom got a bit of a fame online because of his role at the encampments at Harvard, where he got arrested and accused of anti Semitism. Eventually, the case was dismissed, but he went through a lot of hardship because of his role in the encampments. But thankfully, none of this stuck because there was no case around him. He is a graduate of Harvard Divinity School, very impacted by a faith that is centered on Christ and on justice and of liberty. A very powerful story. This is my conversation with him. We discuss his background growing up in Ghana and his unpacking of Christian Zionism, especially when he encountered a Palestinian that changed his life, and then how visiting Palestine had led to a deconstruction of his faith, but then led him to leading in the encampments at Harvard University. A really cool conversation. I think it's going to resonate with a lot of you who also made that journey out of Christian Zionism into a better faith that is centered on Christ and the gospel and the pursuit of peace and justice. So here's my conversation with Elom Tettey-Tamaklo. Elom, welcome to Across the Divide. It's been a pleasure to get to know you over the last few months and to learn about the work you've been doing and also the journey you have taken from Ghana all the way to the US, and that journey as well that is kind of layered with your evolution or movement out of Christian Zionism and through Palestine and back in the US and then Harvard. So I'm very grateful for your presence with us here. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. Across the Divide is honestly one of my favorite podcasts, and it's just amazing to see the kind of people that you bring on and the conversations you have. So it's amazing to be here.
Yeah, welcome. So for Elom, people are going to be very curious to know about your story, coming from Africa, from Ghana, and kind of the journey you've been taken since then. So if you can just kind of give us some highlights about your background, your story, and also the intertwined role of Christian Zionism in that story, I think would be very impactful.
Yeah, totally happy to. So my story is a little bit of a roundabout journey in different places. I was born in Atlanta, and for the first 17 years of my life, I grew up between Ghana and Zimbabwe. So that was the home base. My parents are Ghanaian. My mom is half Indian, half Ghanaian. My father is full Ghanaian. And I grew up in Ghana. And the parents I grew up to were very political in the sense that they focused on issues of social justice. It was important for them to think about, to talk about, and to do the work of social justice. Obviously, the language that we used to refer to wasn't necessarily social justice, but it was ensuring that people are cared for, ensuring that the homeless have places to stay and the hungry have food to eat. And even though they were not necessarily as religious, I say that I grew up in a religious community. Sort of the general disposition of Ghana is pretty religious, evenly split between Muslims and Christians, and there's a general air of sort of religion as a social umbrella. So I grew up with that. And in the community I grew up in, is interesting that a lot of the ideas and the interpretation of scripture propounded or pushed forward the ideas of Christian Zionism. So even though on one hand I had parents who are fierce social justice warriors, welcoming strangers and making sure people are fed, on the other hand, I belonged to a church community that was also pretty Christian Zionist. So at age 17, I believe, I moved to Philadelphia to go to school, went to Haverford College, and it was in Philly that I met a friend who was Palestinian and began to talk to me and teach me about Palestine. And after that, I went to Palestine in 2019, came back to America, went back a couple of times, spent some time in Jordan, and then finally ended up in Boston for school. So it's been a pretty interesting journey, taking me all over the place.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I wanna kind of dig deep into your Palestine journey and how the role that played in forming your own now theology and your own faith. But going back to Ghana and kind of West Africa and that environment, can you tell us more about like, how come Christian Zionism is influential there? Like, what does that church community look like, and why Ghanaians would care about Israel, or why would they adopt Christian Zionism as explicit or implicit? I'm not kind of sure. If it's
Yeah.
implicit, then there's something behind it that is very
Mhm.
powerful. But it's also
Mhm.
if it's explicit, then why would you even care about it?
Yeah, yeah, this is such a good question. And I by no means speak for all Ghanaians, but I do think a significant percentage of the population that identify as charismatic or evangelical or Pentecostal have these ideas of Christian Zionism embedded within the theology. Because in many ways, with the export of Pentecostalism or charismatic evangelical theology around the world, Africa wasn't spared. And historically, many countries in Africa have been sort of hotbeds for Western imperial thought in many ways, shapes, and forms, whether it's economic, whether it's social, and even theological. And I think in many ways, this is why our theology has been so married to, is Christian Zionism is so embedded in our theology because it's a very much Western import that has been taken in and that has been sort of disseminated as gospel. And you see in Ghana, like for instance, you get into a taxi and you see taxi drivers with the Ghanaian flag and with the Israeli flag.
Oh
And in
gosh.
one instance, when I got into this taxi, I asked this guy that, hey, like, why do you have this flag there? And he tells me that it is important to support Israel. So I ask him that, why is it important to support Israel? And he says that these are God's people, and if we bless them, God will bless us. So it is the concept of Israel as a political state is largely absent. Of course, people know that there's a country called Israel, but it is very rooted in the biblical idea that, well, the people of Israel that the Bible describes are the same people, the same country and nation, the political state, and therefore we have an obligation to them. So it's a weird
Yeah.
roundabout theology, especially as we know that Ghanaians were colonized all throughout. We were colonized by the British. We underwent some of the most vicious effects of the transatlantic slave trade. So we're exposed to suffering, we're exposed to colonization, but the theology there doesn't allow us to connect these dots.
Gosh, yeah, that's right. Ghana was a main source of enslaved people, I think,
Yeah,
during
yeah,
that.
we still have many castles on the coast of
Wow.
Ghana.
Yeah, I visited Ghana years ago. Was struck by how beautiful the country is, uh, but also how wonderful and happy and fun people are, and also the
Yeah,
food is amazing.
yeah.
But also was struck by the poverty in Ghana and maybe the bit of corruption. And I wonder if poverty is a driving reason for uh,
Mm,
Christian Zionism. If you want
mm,
to quote what this taxi driver persona you gave us is thinking about Genesis 12:3. Those who
yeah,
bless you
yeah.
will be blessed. Not about Israel, about Abraham, but for him to adopt that Pentecostal often reading of the text, maybe would it align with his sense of poverty and his desire to be wealthy and prosperous. So there's an element of prosperity gospel that
Mm,
is mixing with
mm,
Christian Zionism here.
mm. I think you're absolutely right. In many ways, sort of this alignment with Israel not only features in the eschatological vision of end of days, we have to be saved, but also it impacts people's material realities. So, in the blessing that comes with siding with Israel is can be seen by many people as a means out of poverty, because the prosperity gospel is so tied to this idea. So it's transactional in many ways. And that's why I mentioned at the beginning that perhaps people don't even have an idea of the state of Israel as a political entity, but it's a means to an end. It's a means to this blessing. So it's a transactional relationship that is happening there, and it's impacted by a lot of socioeconomic factors. Ghana definitely is doing better than many countries in the West African region, but we're still plagued by the things that plague many countries in Africa: the resource curse, high debts, and theological interpretation becomes one of the avenues to solve socioeconomic problems. So it's a weird and interesting interplay right there.
Which is very tragic, considering the history, if you said, of enslavement, and people would adopt without understanding what Israel means, what it means to bless Israel. Like how American politicians think of blessing Israel, which is through bombs, but then how an average person in Ghana today, who's part of that legacy of enslavement and dehumanization, would unwittingly support an ideology that dehumanizes people today. So tragic that this is informed by theology, by faith, by church communities that are creating Christians, in this case Ghanaian Christians, who have no understanding or empathy for the Palestinians or what have you, because of their own shared legacy of enslavement and dehumanization, and it would blindly bless Israel, like you're saying. And this is so hard, right? Like, you're not doing it because it's a good thing, it's a right thing. You're doing it because there's a
Yeah,
transaction, you want to get
yeah,
something out of it. And if this is something, like, at the core of it is very rotten, right? Like, you're not doing it because it's right, you're doing it because there's something that you would gain out of it.
exactly.
So sad.
Exactly. And I mean, this is the heart of the prosperity gospel, that God is seen as an ATM where we punch in the right numbers, we do the right things, and we get in return blessings or material wealth or a bunch of different things. And I think in many ways it also signals at the failure of the global church to teach a gospel that is based on sacrifice, to teach a gospel that is based on following Jesus with or without material wealth. And these are things that even members of the church who are well meaning don't like to hear. But I mean, we think about Jesus' statement that says that anyone who desires to follow me, he has to lay down his life, pick up his cross, and come after me. So, embedded within that message, it's a message of sacrifice. It's a message of denying oneself. And we are never promised prosperity in this life simply for following Jesus. So yeah, it's something.
Yeah, there's a lot to kind of to unpack there. And you there's a bit of a sorrow that I have right
Yeah.
now, because I both of us come from the global south, and
Hmm.
there's this kind of beautiful solidarity with Palestinians, because as a global south who has not been affected, well, obviously has been, by kind of imperialism and colonialism and kind of ideologies of colonialism. So
Yeah.
you think it would be easier for that taxi driver to feel like, wow, I need to support the weak and the poor in Gaza, but he's saying no, I need, because of that imported Western theology, probably from the U.S.
Yeah.
That infected his ways of thinking, and it's just kind of sad to me to see the influence. And this is a lot of um, you know experts on colonialism and imperialism kind of highlight
Yeah.
that soft power of the empire, how that works itself out. But the most tragic thing is that people are following Christianity not because of the beauty of Christ, not because of what the beauty of the gospel and the way of the cross. Is because of financial gain that they could
Right.
get out of blessing Israel because that's what the Bible says. So I'm going to do it. And so it's not like a thing that is accepted because it's satisfying, because it's reasonable, because it's true.
Hmm.
It's been accepted because, for some at least,
Yeah,
because there's something out of it for me.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
kind of tragic kind of example of how Christianity could be a source of really bad things,
yeah, yeah.
especially in the global south.
It's something, and I think in the last few months there has been an upsurge in support for the Palestinian cause. I mean, as someone who's not in Ghana, but just looking from the outside and following writers and thinkers, there's been an upsurge, especially among younger populations. So, what we're seeing in Africa is that in many countries in Africa, specifically Western Africa, is there's a breakdown of imperial structures. So, for instance, Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso has kicked out all the French. They're taking strides to break down this imperial hegemon. And I think in many ways it's leaking or spreading to other countries in Africa. So young people in Ghana, for instance, are saying that, well, we've seen what is happening in Palestine. We've seen what is happening in Gaza. There is no way that we can also sort of follow the tradition of our parents or grandparents who have blindly supported Israel. And something that is notable is that 2 days ago, there was the Israeli Film Festival in Ghana, and a
Wow.
bunch of academics, a bunch of musicians, filmmakers, journalists came out in support of a boycott, and which was really heartening to see because a couple of years back, this would not have been possible. So the tide is definitely turning. It's slow, but the tide is turning.
Yeah. And there's an interest, I think, that Israel has in Africa as well, in getting African countries on
Yeah.
board. Just for context, I don't have a lot of information right now because this is off the cuff, but your reference of Burkina Faso, I think the prime minister or the president, just a few months ago, worked out this deal where basically compelled the French to leave
Hmm.
Burkina Faso after basically a legacy of decades. I'm not the expert of African history, but basically after decades of the French having military bases and also the history of French colonialism, was
Yep.
able to force the French out, which was seen as a big thing for a lot of African countries, kind of
Perfect.
eventually getting rid of Western colonialism. Is that accurate? I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't want
that's
to.
accurate.
Okay.
You're
Okay.
a
Good.
scholar. You're a
Okay.
scholar of African history.
No, no, I'm not. I'm not.
Thanks for your
Okay.
PhD.
Right. Not in African studies. Okay. So I want to move to what you just said, what you said about your encounter with that Palestinian person and that impact it had on you. And honestly, Elam, this is very common among people, and I'm sure many who are listening to the podcast
Yeah.
who met the Palestinian, and that Palestinian, without being anything fancy or smart, just
Hmm.
meeting that Palestinian would have completely transformed their lives or how they thought about
Yeah.
Palestine and Israel. Could you
Yeah.
just kind of explain that to us and what that person did to you, and then kind of what followed since then?
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. I describe it as divine intervention in many ways because this individual wasn't necessarily a friend of mine pre this encounter. Through a chance encounter, I met them. It was actually because they had dropped their passport. So I pick up the passport and I email the owner of the passport. So I go to deliver the passport to the person, and I ask, "What is your name?" And he mentions his name, and I'm like, "Where are you from?" And he says, "Palestine." The moment he says Palestine, all the bells start going off in my head. Because to the Christian Zionist imaginary, you're hearing Palestine and you're hearing Philistine. You're
Mm,
hearing enemy of God's people. You're hearing people who are not chosen. In some Christian Zionist circles, you're hearing the children of Esau or the descendants of Esau who fought against the promise. So all sorts of things are coming to mind in this moment. But for some reason, curiosity or divine intervention got the better of me. And I'm like, tell me more about
mm,
Palestine.
mm,
So he starts to share with me, and he shares how his family was displaced. They moved to Jordan. They were refugees in Jordan. And my mind is slowly, there's something that is turning. I don't understand everything I'm hearing. I don't even think I agree, but I realized that there's an actual human being who is Palestinian, who has family, who has a history telling me these things. And there's something in me that starts to turn. So it was not only that conversation. So in subsequent months, we developed a relationship, would talk, would have dinners, and he keeps telling me about Palestine, the history, the culture. And it's interesting because simultaneously, I had another friend who was Zionist, staunchly Zionist. Family lived in America, but he had family in Israel. So I would go between them asking, so my Palestinian friend tells me something, and I'll go and corroborate with the Zionist student. And I just couldn't piece it together. So after a couple of months of this back and forth, this table tennis, so to speak, he says, it's important to go and see for yourself because you're very curious. And there was no way that I was going to go to Palestine. How was I going to make it there? But I think just by divine intervention, one thing led to the other. I spent a couple of weeks in Ramallah, and to see for myself the things on the ground was deeply heartbreaking. But also it was reminiscent of a lot of the things that we had heard and we had seen in our history. I think about the fact that Black South Africans in South Africa during the apartheid era they were put in certain geographies and they were not allowed to mix with other people like whites and coloreds. And I'm looking at how in Palestine, Palestinians can drive on some roads to move from Bethlehem to Ramallah. Jerusalem's in the middle. You are not able to even go through. You have to meander your way through. And I'm like, no, something is definitely wrong with this. And I'm making the connections to our history. I'm making the connections to the things we're seeing. And the biblical imperative of treating everyone with equality really struck me. And sort of that was the beginning of my deconstruction.
Why would you go to Palestine to start with, Elom? Surely you had deconstructed before then for you to go to Palestine, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. I think there was a curiosity in me.
Sure. Okay.
There was a curiosity. And I think also within the Christian Zionist imaginary, Palestinians are not afforded any humanity. They are not afforded a story. They are not afforded a voice. They're non-entities in the story. And I've always been attracted to, those who don't have a voice. My favorite characters in the scriptures are people like the Samaritan woman, or people who were always at the edges. I was always curious, what were these folks thinking? What was their story? And in modern day, I think Palestinians have occupied that role within the Christian Zionist imaginary. They are the ends of the story. They are the margins. Whatever happens to them is supposed to happen to them for this larger spiritual vision to take place. And I was like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah. No, Alam, this your encounter in Palestine has been the encounter of many people. That when they go and see it, it actually really transforms the way that they think. Yeah, we've been sidelined from whether it's the Christian Zionist imagery, but also from just the discourse, the political discourse. We are never seen as humans, and so to have that encounter and having that impact, it's so palpable. But also, it makes sense that that person who's like, I'm just Palestinian. Here's my story. It's not. But then for you, it's just like, well, this is a big deal. Like, what?
Yeah,
He's real. He's a real person. But then all of these things I understood, and my identity and my faith and my family, what my family told me is true, what my pastor said, and all of these things are happening to you. And he's like, hi, I'm just a Palestinian. And I'm sorry this is happening to you, but I just exist. I'm here. But that's kind of the thing. People are always like, I don't know if this is appropriate, but Palestinians were not that remarkable. We're just people, we're just like anyone else,
Exactly.
But what makes the Palestinian story, and even specifically the Palestinian Christian story, so compelling is just because of all that baggage that people carried and held and thought and believed about the Palestinians. and then we are just saying, hey, we're nothing special, we're just normal. And just
Yeah.
to say that you're normal, it's like a shocking thing to people.
Yeah.
But then moving from there, Alam, how I mean, a lot has happened since then in your convictions, from being a Christian Zionist all the way to you getting arrested at Harvard for being a leader in the encampments.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack that in a bit. But so is that when basically you had to give up Christian Zionism and say, no, there's something else here I need to pursue? Like, what's the story
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
What happened on the other side of this journey?
Yeah. That's a really good question. Um, And I wouldn't want it to seem as if it was just like overnight, suddenly all my Christian Zionist tendencies fell off. It took a while because I'm seeing things on the ground. I remember going to Bethlehem, to Ida refugee camp, and it is the most tear gas place in the whole world. And I'm there and I'm listening to the stories, and I just can't understand how we who say that everyone is created in the image and in the likeness of God, and we pursue the imago Dei, the image of God in everyone. On account of that, everyone has to be treated well. Palestinians are the exception. It doesn't compute with our theology. And if there is a theological, or if there's a deity that demands that people are excluded because they are born in Palestine, because they are Palestinian, I do not think that deity is worth following, because I think about the fact that it's just a birth lottery. I could have been born in Gaza. I could have I could have had my family could have been displaced. Like, I just couldn't compute that. So with those thoughts came a lot of wrestling and a lot of reading, and someone that I would name as a crucial thought partner for me was Jean Zaru. And Jean Zaru is a Palestinian Quaker theologian. She spoke at the UN many times, and I met her when I was in Ramallah. And Jean Zaru talked extensively about the importance of decolonizing our theology. And she talked extensively about the importance of doing everything we can to ensure that Palestinians achieve self determination. And I think what was appealing about her message is that you can just create a crack, just act simple, mundane, regular, everyday acts. Create a crack that allows light to come through. So that for me was sort of the fuel that pushed the engine forward. And meeting other Palestinian theologians and Christians and regular Palestinians and hearing their stories really did a lot for me. And also, I guess the question that started coming up in my mind is, if we have been lied to, as it were, about Palestine as it relates to our theological understandings, what else have we been lied to about? So Palestine essentially for me was, for lack of better words, a gateway drug. So I started looking at the texts that I believe was the Dutch church in South Africa used to justify apartheid. And I was like, this makes sense. I mean, there was a deliberate twisting of scripture to ensure that Black folks were kept subservient, and it became national policy. And I was like, this is wild. Or I think about some of the earlier missionaries who came to the coast, the western coast of Africa, talking about sort of, they're coming on missionary journeys, and in God's name, they're enslaving the natives, or they're reforming the natives. I mean, one of the first ships that came was called Jesus of Lubbock. And they believed that it was a theological and it was a missionary journey to do the will of God through a very twisted interpretation of the scripture. So Palestine really began to uncover all these for me. So I was like, wow, it made things clearer and the analysis sharper in that way.
And then you moved back to the US and you worked in finance, right? That's right. So how did that kind of, so you had a completely different life ahead of you. What happens, like, So you still are doing finance now? No, you're kind of moved on from that, right? You're now in
I've
the
moved on
Divinity
from that
School at
life.
Harvard, right? So you live that
Yeah,
life, but then you're like, wait, I need to do more work in theology, obviously, because of what you just said,
yeah,
right? Is that the story that you
yeah,
just
yeah,
had to give that up? Yeah.
yeah, precisely. You're absolutely right. I mean, I was doing work in finance and then moved into tech for a bit, but the questions were plaguing me. The things I
Mm,
had seen, the things I had experienced, the friends I had made, I just I couldn't turn it off. Because when you see things like that, I think it takes a high level of desensitization to say
mhm,
that
mhm,
I'm not concerned, I'm going on with my life. It haunts you. And especially as people who live in America, who pay taxes to America, America that is the financial backer of Israel and the horrendous things we're seeing. It we can't just sit silent in that way and just turn our heads. So for me, it was a gnawing, it was a constant thing on my heart. So I quit my job, and in 2022, I believe I moved to Jordan in the attempt to learn more, to talk to more people, to understand. But I think the provision, the divine provision here was that in back. So we're going back in the story. In 2019, when I was in Ramallah, I was I was teaching at a school. I was experiencing, learning for myself. There was a Harvard Divinity School student, Asmira Hamuri Davis, who was
mm.
we lived together. We had just met, and Asmira and I talked a lot. We were thinking, contemplating, and Asmira said, "It is important for you to pursue these questions." And she says, "Consider divinity school." I was like, "Girl, there is no way I'm going to divinity school. There is no way." Of all the things I could do, divinity school? No. But slowly, through her encouragement, through her constancy, I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a stab at it. I'm just gonna apply to Harvard because I had a connection with her. She went to Harvard. Let's see what
Sure.
comes out of
That's just
this.
the easiest, whatever university, right? Yeah. Might as
I think
well.
there was a part of me that didn't think I'll get in. I was like, okay, divinity school, finance, tech, divinity school. The story is kind of
Yeah, that's great.
crazy. But I got in, and I was like, okay, let's see what it means to think about these questions, these
Mm,
theological questions. And I remember my personal statement talked a lot about Bethlehem and the things I'd seen in 2019. And I was resolute in getting to the heart of these.
that's so
So
great.
that's how I ended up here.
We keep learning from that person who was born in Bethlehem, and
Yeah,
and your
yeah,
time in Bethlehem even led you to learn more about him. So that led you to the divinity school at Harvard.
yeah.
Um, you finished your graduate studies at Harvard,
I
right?
finished. I
You
finished
finished. You just
past May.
finished, right? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Okay, so before 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 you finished, you were involved in the encampments at Harvard. And if people do not know, there's a famous episode of someone trying to dox the. I don't want to tell the story. You're gonna tell the story,
Yeah.
but basically, someone who came to dox and you put a kufiyya up to block them, but eventually got arrested, and you had to deal with this for like a year and a bit.
Hmm. Hmm.
So can you just tell us about the encampments? And I think people would be curious to know about the encampment in Harvard specifically, because you lost
Yeah.
your president because of that encampment at
Yeah.
Harvard, and the whole kind of charge of anti-Semitism. And because it was not that, I'm sure you had Jewish leaders working with you. So you can
Hmm.
just kind of tell us a bit about that experience at the encampment before we talk about the charges against you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's been a long history of Palestine organizing here at Harvard. There have been so many students who have been doing the work in different ways. So for me coming here, it was sort of natural to join that team and to help with efforts. And a couple of folks and I established the Graduate Students for Palestine to sort of centralize Palestine organizing on campus. So we did a lot of work in my first year 2022. And then the summer of 2023, I go back to Bethlehem. I'm in Bethlehem for a bit. And then I come back in August or September. And then October 7th happens, and then we begin to ramp up protests, demonstrations, die-ins, amongst other things. And obviously, the eye of the world, it feels as though it's on Harvard, because they say when Harvard sneezes, the world catches a cold. So obviously, they're looking at the students who released the statement. They're calling for doxing. But one thing I would say is that the bravery of our comrades here is unmatched. The fact that, in spite of everything, in spite of attempts to dox, in spite of senators and Congress people calling for our removal, folks were resolute. And following the lead of Columbia University, who I believe started one of the first encampments, we set up an encampment in the spring, and the idea was, at least the main demand was for our university to divest. And we're following in the tradition of many students who have done similar things in the Vietnam War, in for apartheid South Africa, for the living wage campaign here on Harvard's campus. So we were following in that tradition. However, we have I think what was pretty difficult about this was how a lot of faculty, a lot of staff, and administration were so scared that they were unable to speak up and support. We had a good contingent supporting, we had people who were helping, but you would expect faculty, staff, and admin to support students who are engaging in what they will consider civil disobedience for the freedom, the dignity, and the liberation of people. I mean, this is what we are taught to engage with. But suddenly, scholars of decoloniality, scholars of race, scholars of even people in the divinity school, suddenly quiet. And as the attacks mounted on us, as people were doxxed, as people were threatened, a couple of people didn't receive their degrees, or they were threatened that they wouldn't receive their degrees, there was such silence. And something I constantly say is that it really showed me that within these institutions, we are learned, they teach us a lot, we read a lot, we have a lot of access, but they don't teach us what it means to be courageous. They don't teach us the mechanics of courage. And for me, what I wonder is, what is the point of being so learned, of being so prolific, of writing a lot, of traveling a lot, when, if you can't, in the moment that calls for it, speak to the issues at hand? I mean, we're seeing in real time, through very graphic images, Palestinians being slaughtered, people burned in their tents, schools full of children bombed. You can't imagine the horror we're seeing. But rather, our institutions choose to capitulate to donors, to people who are powerful. And I think this is the symptom of American exceptionalism. That it doesn't matter that we start and we fund evil abroad, we are content keeping quiet about it. And it is impossible. We can't do that. And that for me is what my comrades taught me. And it was really wild, the mechanics of the encampment. I mean, because at point in time they put on sprinklers so that people can't sleep. Like it was really, really absurd. But people stood their ground in ways that was honestly amazing. So if any comrades are listening to this, shout out to you all. You all did what a lot of adults and mentors
Yeah.
couldn't do.
Yeah, I mean, I was part of the Notre Dame encampment, and it's a similar story. If like,
Yeah.
especially, especially Notre Dame. I mean, I love Notre Dame in so many different ways, but because of Notre Dame is explicitly Christian, is a
Mm,
private Christian university, we have this extra layer of disappointment. Like, this is what
yeah.
you keep telling us about pursuing the dignity of every human being and
Yeah.
Catholic social teachings. It's like, okay, well, show us. Like when it
Mm,
counts, show us how what that looks
exactly.
like. And I
Exactly.
mean, there's a crackdown, and they arrested 17 of the students, and so on and so forth. How was your experience at the encampment itself? Like the what was the vibe like? Because I was a beautiful time for me at Harvard at Notre Dame. How was it for you? Kind of
Yeah.
the I don't
Yeah.
know the spirit there, the Jewish and Muslim and Christian kind of space, especially for you as a Harvard Divinity student who's motivated, obviously, as we can tell from your faith. Like what? How did that look like for you?
Yeah. I think about the prayer or the line in the Lord's Prayer that says, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And in many ways, when I went to the encampment, that echoed through my mind constantly
Wow.
because there was no lack of food, of care, of shelter. You would think that students sleeping in tents, we would be like sort of like scrambling. There would be like little charity to go around, but there was no lack, whether from people in the encampment or people outside. I mean, we would have multi-religious services where people and comrades from different faith traditions and people who didn't even express faith themselves would be in the space, would contribute to this. We had multiple teachings and we had singing and dancing. And I think this in many ways reflected an alternative vision of reality. And a lot of naysayers would be like, well, these entitled kids who are just setting up tents under the protection of their school community, this can't be much. But I think what this does for us, encampments across the country, they are revealing to us a new vision of what it could be, what our communities could be, what real teaching and learning could be, not a hierarchical one, but horizontally. We were learning from each other. We were sharing things. We were involved in the dynamics of people's lives. I quite remember that we had folks who had to take exams because it was in the spring, end of semester. They took exams in the encampment, and it just showed a kind of commitment to the ideals of freedom and liberation. And I mean, I was just very, very moved by it. There's a pretty fantastic video of the interfaith service where we had our Muslim siblings, Jewish siblings, and Christian siblings coming together and performing ritual and reading from text and offering music in ways that was powerful. That was really, really compelling. And yeah, that was the kingdom of God. That was it. Yeah.
Not what how some people would think of the kingdom of God, but such a beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we had the same thing at Notre Dame, and it was such a beautiful space for this to see how different expressions of faith could unite on a very beautiful, beautiful in a very beautiful way about something that is very essential.
Mhm.
The humanity of the Palestinians and the end of war, and
Yeah,
it's something that is not common in religious spaces. You don't have Christians and Muslims worshiping together. You don't have Jews
exactly.
and Christians worshiping together, but then you can worship together because of your care for the Palestinian people. It's like, this
Hmm.
is a
Hmm.
remarkable. I mean, I'm sure
Hmm.
it maybe happened, maybe it happens in some other spaces, I'm sure, but it's such a beautiful kind of ecumenical space, and
Yeah,
yeah, it kind of makes you think. I get that sense that this is what the kingdom of God could look like. That all of us coming
exactly.
together in
Exactly.
obedience to the will and to the goodness of God, and um, in desire to see humanity restored. So
Yeah.
that's so good. So despite all of that, the beautiful kind of sense of this anti establishment movement of the encampment, so calling for something very basic, which is to not profit off of genocide, to
Yep.
divest from companies and so on that are profiting from the war. Now, personally, Alam, you got attacked because there's a video of you. People could, I mean, it's there of you putting a putting a
Put in the
kufi
show
up
notes.
to block out a
Yeah.
student. I think I don't know if they were he was a student, but basically this person who was coming in to docs and to attack you,
Yeah.
and then you put the kufi up, and then you pushed him. You and others pushed him out, and that caused a ruckus. They were accused of being an anti-Semite because you blocked the guy from entering into the
Yeah.
encampment.
Yeah.
Yeah, just can you tell us, for those who do not know your story, could you tell us about what happened and and what
Yeah.
happened since then?
Really, really interesting. I mean, who knew a kafia could generate such
Right.
tension? We have expanded the uses of kafiyas. Not only a political
Right.
symbol, but to block Zionists. So if you have a kafiya, make sure you use it well. But basically, we were having a die-in, one of the many protests that happened, and during the die-in, there about like 150, I believe, or 200 people there. And as one of the protest organizers, we're tasked with ensuring that people are safe and the community is kept secure at all times. So we're reading the names of martyrs, and this individual walks into the die-in, and the die-in, people's eyes are closed and people are laying on their backs, and he walks over them. He hits a few people, and his aim was to dox because he's holding a camera at close range and videoing people's faces and identities. And it is important to note that pre that, in the weeks before, we had doxing trucks around campus. Doxing trucks had gone to people's homes. People had lost job offers. It was a terrible time in many ways. So this individual comes into the die-in, and we didn't know who this individual was because this was at the business school campus, and the campus is open, so anyone can walk in. So he walks in and he's attempting to record or recording. And we ask him to leave. He refuses to leave. We lift our keffiyehs as we've been trained to do to prevent him from recording. He refuses to leave. He bumps into us many times. All the while, our hands are on our keffiyehs because it's important that we don't touch him. Back and forth, back and forth. And I'm so grateful that I believe it was MSNBC that was there with a helicopter. So if you look for the videos, you can see an aerial shot which shows everything. And eventually he leaves. A couple of days or maybe like a week later, there is a news report about an Israeli student who was accosted on his way to class simply for being Israeli.
Poor thing.
And my name is up there. I'm like, this must be a joke, guys. This must absolutely be a joke. But so I didn't pay too much attention to it. And suddenly it started gathering more momentum. Different groups of people are talking about it. Senators are talking about it. Congress people are talking about it. Elise Stefanik is writing about it. Fox News is talking about it, that an Israeli student on his way to class is accosted, is manhandled, is assaulted by Elom and another student. And immediately I'm just like, what is happening here? But I think they conveniently ignored the fact that the safety marshals that were involved in ensuring that he wasn't recording had a couple of Jewish folks, and it just didn't fit the narrative. So it was better for them to pin it on us, a black and a brown student. The other student is Muslim, and they called us thugs. They called us violent. Another time I was a proctor. A proctor is basically a residential assistant who lives on the hall with first years. I was fired from my job. I lost my housing. I lost my meal privileges. And then there was an FBI investigation launched by the former president, Claudine Gay, a black woman. This was one of the very first times that the FBI was allowed to come on campus to investigate current students. And I mean, the thing is that if there is a tussle or there is a misunderstanding between graduate students or students of Harvard, there are avenues within the school to pursue that. But on the advice and on the pressure and the threat of donors and influential people, the FBI was brought on campus or investigated us. Various law firms investigated us. And then finally, it was referred to the criminal courts. So we were charged for anti-Semitism, a hate crime. And we said, wait, how did we know the student was Jewish? He was not wearing a kippah. How did we know? In the court documents, they said that because he was wearing a blue shirt.
What? Wait, that's actually the talking point, that he was wearing a blue shirt?
He was wearing a blue shirt, so it signaled that he was as like Habibi. Time to throw away all my blue shirts, otherwise I'm pro-Israel. It was so absurd. And then they said that we're charged for assault and battery. And I make light of it, but it was a grueling...
Yeah, I mean, it's not funny really, but yeah. Now it is funny, I suppose, because it's so ridiculous. But I mean, this is a serious thing. I mean, when it was happening last year in the spring, the whole thing was, look at all these anti-Semites, look at, and this continues even today with the attacks at Harvard University and being sued by the government. So, but they wanted that case. They wanted to prove that that anti-Semites were doing the encampments. And of course, they threw everything at you, right? I guess that's kind of part of the scheme there.
Correct.
And you were basically, this is it's so tragic, and I don't want to be minimize it, because it's actually super sinister. You're using something very serious, anti-Semitism, a horrible, evil
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
because you lifted up a kufi. Yeah.
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
and it's so insane
Yeah.
how this works. But then everyone bought it. Like the
100%.
majority of Americans were thinking, yeah, this is true. These are anti-Semites at the encampments. I'm like, what are you
100%.
talking about?
It's
But if they make that charge against you and they accuse you of that, it's over. Like, of course,
yeah,
it's true. It
it
must be true.
must be
Um,
true. Very vile. You know,
and eventually, and sorry, what did you say about the previous president, Gay? What
she was
worked with FBI to have you prosecuted? Is
so
that
she
what you
was the
said?
one who allowed the FBI. She
Okay.
gave the rights for the FBI to come on campus to investigate us, and it's very unprecedented. You have students who are in your school, and you allow federal law enforcement to come investigate us, which was
I guess she
something.
wanted to protect her career in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because I think
Exactly.
she was accused of plagiarism.
She
She
was.
didn't quit then, but then she had to leave after the encampments. Is that what happened?
She had to leave after she gave she was called into Congress to give a testimony
Right.
with other presidents. I think the president of MIT and the president of Penn,
Right.
and she was asked that is the chant from the river to the sea genocidal chant against Jewish people. And she says, well, there's context to it. It's important to explore context. And I agree with her. It's
Yeah.
no one is calling for the genocide of Jewish people. Far from that. We're saying that it is important that between the river and the sea, there's equal rights
Yeah.
for
But
all people who live there.
freedom. There would be freedom in
Freedoms.
Palestine, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they played on that, and eventually she was forced to resign.
Right. Yeah. So she tried to play the political game, but it didn't work for her.
Exactly.
Now, I mean, we're talking about this now because, in case people are curious, you got acquitted. There
Yeah.
was no case against you, and
Yeah.
there's some people look you up. They can see some footage from the court case and so on. So what happened eventually? They just didn't have a case and they just kind of give up, or what happened?
Yeah, so I mean, they dropped initially the civil rights charge, the hate crime charge, anti-Semitism. They dropped it. They had no basis for that, and all throughout the proceeding, I think it's important to know that this individual's father is a very prominent Israeli American diplomat. So he has a lot of power and influence
Well, there you go.
throughout
There you go.
this.
Yeah.
Very important to note.
Yeah.
And one of the things they asked throughout the court case was for a public apology. And I was very bent on the fact that there is no apology going to be given for protecting students from a Zionist who was attempting to dox them. And I think this is the psychology of Zionism. Zionism is bent on destruction. Destruction, first of all, of Palestinians, and destruction of people who stand in support of Palestine. And Zionism partners with other ills. So obviously, I was called a thug, I was called a terrorist, all these things, because it is common within the American imaginary and the American historical parlance to think of a black man as violent, to think of a black man and to think of a Muslim man as a terrorist. So Zionism is partnering with these ideas to execute. So now they're asking us to apologize. I'm like, halas, it's impossible. I would much rather see the walls of a Massachusetts jail than to say sorry for protecting my friends. Impossible.
Yeah.
Impossible. I'm not going to do it. So we went back and forth. And eventually they gave us 80 hours of community service, whereas the standard community service for other protesters on different campuses was 40. They said we will do 80 hours of community service, which involved, picking up trash, going to homeless shelters, just a bunch of different things. And then we did a negotiation course, which we had to pay from out of pocket. And then we did anger management, because obviously we are the angry, irrational, crazy individuals. We're like, okay, whatever you want us to do, we'll do this, but we are not giving an apology. And eventually the case was dropped. So
you still had to do the community service and
yeah,
you had to do
that
that.
was a condition. But now
even
we don't
though
have
there was no case against you.
no. That was the pre-trial diversion. They said, well, you
that
do
was a
that.
diversion. Okay.
so you don't go to trial.
You could have, yeah. I mean, the same thing that the students at Notre Dame did. They just had the pre-trial
Yeah,
diversion. Why
yeah,
didn't you feel kind of comfortable? I mean, I guess
yeah,
you didn't want it. I mean, who wants to go to court? But is
yeah.
that kind of why you just want to avoid the drama and you don't
Yeah.
want it to kind of
So
stick around?
at this point, we were in court for about 13 or 14 months, if I'm remembering correctly. And I was cognizant of the fact that if we went to trial with a grand jury, we would win the case because there's no evidence. And a lot of people had written, journalists had written, former lawyers had written from the ACLU, even prosecutors, Massachusetts prosecutors had said, look, this is a farce, let it go. But the moment we go to trial, there's a criminal record there. And as a Black man in America, I fully understand that to have a criminal record is, it's a nail in the coffin, because 1 in 5 Black men in America have an encounter with the criminal justice system. So it was wise for me to say that, look, whatever they want me to do, I'll do. I will not acknowledge guilt or anything, but I need to avoid a trial because
Even if you get acquitted, it would still remain on your record.
I remember my record as having a criminal, because you go through the process. I think after a couple of years, you can expunge it, but it's
Yeah,
one of
you
those
just didn't
things.
want. You don't want that. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
actually. Thanks for sharing that. And I think people would miss that too. There is a racial element, and also you highlighted the Muslim colleague of yours and how both of you were targeted, and you were easy
yeah,
targets. Like a black
yeah,
man, a
yes,
thug, of course, that's a very racialized term,
yeah, yeah,
and also a Muslim, because a Muslim is the easiest target in the U.S.
precisely.
Um, yeah, I'm so glad you're out of this. I'm so glad you're done with this garbage, and yeah, very grateful for you and your solidarity. And I mean, it's a small price to pay. I mean, I don't know if you would say that, but
Yeah,
this is such important work, and this is, and I think history is gonna remember your activism and your work
yeah.
in a positive
No,
way.
Daniel, I think
Yeah,
you
go ahead.
make a very good point that I want to just sort of
Yeah,
piggyback off. You say it's a small price to pay, and I 100% want to agree with you that it is such, and I don't want to be, I don't want to minimize the event or minimize the feelings of others who've gone through things who are listening to this. That is important in the context. And anything we do in solidarity with oppressed people is such a small price to pay for the work that is being done. I mean, I really want to echo that we are not the heroes of this story. Far from that. And I don't say this with some sort of false pretensions of humility that, oh, no, 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 don't look at me. No, we are not the heroes. Look, if history doesn't remember us, if the history of Harvard or whatever is written and this case doesn't come up, halas, it's okay. Because the reason we do what we do is because, as Howard Thurman says, we stand with the people with their backs against the wall. And if you stand with people in solidarity, solidarity means you are standing with them, bearing their afflictions with them. Christ says, or the gospel says that bear the burdens of one another, thereby fulfilling the law of Christ. This is what the gospel says. And if we're bearing the burdens of Palestinians with them in this case, and I mean, I can't even say we're bearing the burdens of them with them. I mean, I who was in Harvard, how can I dare say it comes even in
right,
close
right,
proximity?
yeah,
So I just want to say that I think it's important to realize we're not the heroes. This is a small price to pay. And in many ways, maybe this is a hot take for your listeners. In many ways, it's a privilege to suffer for the children of God. It's such a privilege, you
mm.
know? So just wanted to name that. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. Well, I mean that. We have to kind of wrap up soon, but yeah, that's such an important word, and I think we need to have this conversation about our responsibility moving forward. So you and I were at this conference. I think a very important conference, Church of the Crossroads, just happened last weekend, and you gave a short presentation. You mentioned your story, but then you finished your presentation with this kind of appeal to the church to put a spoke in the wheel of evil. Let's give this a listen, and then we can discuss it together.
Question I believe the Spirit is asking each one of us seated in this room today is, what can you do with what you have to put a spoke in the wheel of evil? I believe the freedom-giving spirit who led Harriet Tubman from the shackles of slavery is asking, is there any sacrifice too costly to prevent another Palestinian child from Israeli-inflicted, American-funded death deal? How many more Hind Rajabs would we need to see to say enough is enough? Or my friends, have we become too comfortable with our lives and our careers and our achievements and the good name that we cannot make a change? Have we forgotten that the call of Jesus is a call to lay down our lives, pick up the cross and follow him? Follow Jesus, who sought justice for those at the sidelines. Today, I am so convinced that the voice of God echoes from Rafah. It echoes from Jabaliyah. It echoes from Khan Yunis. It echoes for the mothers and the fathers and the children whose lives have been ripped away whilst we have sat and watched for the last 700 plus days. The voice of the Spirit is asking, what shall we do to put a spoke in this wheel of evil?
So Elom, you said in the clip that we have gotten so comfortable and we need to put that spoke in the wheel of evil. And I think that resonated with a lot of people, because people are realizing, wait, I need to do something right now. I need to actually get that spoke and put it in the wheel. Do you think this is like an important issue now when it comes to confronting Christian Zionism? Has the church in the West gotten so comfortable not paying attention to this issue, and there's actually this serious now responsibility to actually do something about Christian Zionism?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I mean, the idea of putting a spoke in the wheel of evil is taken from Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer, who's a German theologian during the Nazi regime. And Bonhoeffer says this to confront the complicity of the church, especially the church in Germany. And I think in many ways, this is a call to us also, the church in America, the church in the West, that we have a responsibility primarily to God and to our neighbor. When Jesus is asked that what is the greatest commandment, he says that love the Lord your God and love your neighbor. And it is impossible to say that we are followers of the way if we are turning away from our Palestinian siblings who are being genocided. I mean, we look today, we're seeing the ground invasion of Gaza City. We're seeing a second Nakba, a third Nakba happen in real time. And if we in the church, who have the responsibility of doing justice, of walking humbly before our God, we can't do anything. We can't be inconvenienced. We can't sacrifice. The church has lost its witness, because the very foundation of Christianity and Christian thought has never been a popular appeal. I mean, the Gospels are framed around people who are the sidelines of Roman occupation, who are pushing against this unjust world, and they're struggling for a new world. So to think that, well, we have to be accepted, we have to make our tactics sort of like palatable, we can't do too much, we can't say too much, it defeats our Christian witness. The heart of the Christian witness is saying that as said in Isaiah, that the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to preach the gospel. He talks about setting the captives free. And this is what I believe the Spirit is asking of us. It's asking of us that shall we let another child in Gaza die? Shall we let another mother mourn over her children, lift her children up? Shall we let another father, see the destruction of his family? Because even if, you see, I am of the firm belief, as a lot of Palestinian theologians have said, that God is with the oppressed, firmly. So Palestine will survive. Gaza will survive. We are the ones whose souls are eternally compromised. We are the ones who have seen so much horror and we've turned away. Amos says that woe to you, those who turn away. So I just want to say to listeners that, look, I know folks in America, folks are far away, whatever you can do in your communities, do it. Is it a film screening you can do with 3 friends? Yalla, do it. Is it a book club? Do it. Is it a protest? Go out. Is it a letter? Sign. Call reps. Do everything we can with everything we have to ensure that not one more Palestinian is killed. Because if we take Jesus's words seriously, he says he leaves the 99 for the one. For the one. And we've seen hundreds of thousands of Palestinians killed. How can we say we follow Jesus? So yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's amazing. That's hard. That's maybe some hard teaching for people. And if they listen to this and they feel uncomfortable, then maybe they need to sit in that and say, well, why is this making me uncomfortable? But then, what do I need to do right now? What if this is actually our witness is being compromised because of our lack of action? How's this going to change? What am I going to do right now? Elom, thank you so much. This has been really fascinating. I wish this could be a much longer conversation, but I think we need to stop now. Very grateful for you, for the work you've been doing, for your solidarity, for this beautiful theology that you have, and very compelling kind of demand, I think, in a very prophetic and very biblical way, to follow Jesus seriously, to take Jesus seriously, and to proclaim that kingdom of justice and of liberation. So thank you so much for being with us, Elom.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. And thank you for all your listeners. You guys are amazing.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Across the Divide. We are so grateful for your support and interest. The hosts of this podcast are Daniel Banura, Jennifer Madrand, and myself, Abir Shahadi. Salim Anfous is our producer. Our theme music is composed by Charlie Rishmawi. To help sustain the work of this podcast, please consider becoming a financial supporter of Across the Divide. Any donation amount makes a difference, and with a donation of as little as $5 a month, you will gain access to exclusive supporter-only content. Go to patreon.com/acrossthedivide to learn more and donate. For any feedback or suggestions, connect with us on Instagram at Across the Divide Podcast. Until next time, stay curious, stay passionate, stay engaged, and join us again on Across the Divide.